Did I get it worked out? I'm sorry. I had some technical difficulties, right? Um the I was on the phone with I have a friend who is a was he's actually done with his term. He was a mayor. So I was talking to him about like where to start as far as like where can we start as far as over freezing. I see that I'm freezing. How is everybody? I'm sorry that I was late. I tried to get off the phone with him, but he really is such a good human being that like I just had to end. So I kind of want to start at the beginning because I think that for people to understand the family school, you kind of have to go back to where it started, right? Um, I did also pull. So originally I wanted to do this on StreamYard, right? Because then I would be able to pull in pictures, and somebody dropped a handbook, um, the student handbook in our Facebook group the other day, and I had to get permission to share it. But I wanted you guys to see that so that I can um elaborate on just how crazy and like fucked up these people were. It did start at Eastridge, right? And a lot of the staff. Hold on a second. Can y'all see me? Okay. So a lot of the staff. Okay. So first, I do want to say this. Um, the I went to the family school. There's different eras, right? I say eras because at some point I was there before the new school was complete, right? There were different eras as far as the kids went, like they tried to fix structure, um, and it they tried to conform to regulations, right? Still super abusive, right? So when I hear staff members say things like, "Oh, you saved my life," right? I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that is a much later era kid, right? Because the school did try to change some of their policies, right? Um, so a lot of the staff when I was there, right, they did come from a place called Eastridge. Eastridge was based on All Addicts Anonymous. It kind of was like a 12-step program, but it had more um it was centered more around any type of addiction, right? Granted, when I was there, the staff, most of them came from Eastridge, right? Eastridge was also super, I don't want to say super, based, we'll use based on a lot of the practices that they used in their policies came from Synanon, right? If you don't know what Synanon is, it is oftentimes called the most violent cult because the leader was super more like a mob boss, right? Um, so Synanon, the practices in Synanon trickled through Eastridge, and then those staff members, right, took what they wanted from Hey Yo. They took what they wanted from Eastridge, and then they brought it to the family, right? So the family was created originally. It was not a school, right? I keep freezing and I'm seeing it and I don't know why. Um, it did not start as a school, right? It started more like a foster home for runaways, right? People that were struggling in life. And Tony and Betty, I see it freezing on my end. It's been a long time since I did a YouTube live, y'all. Um, Tony and Betty are the founders, right? Tony has passed. Betty is still alive and trying to sell artwork, but they were the owners, right? When I was there, they didn't necessarily live there anymore. They did move to, I believe, South Carolina. I think it was South Carolina. It was somewhere down south, right? So they weren't there 24/7 as they used to be, right? They would come and visit and and I guess oversee, but at that point in time, the school, like the day-to-day operations were ran by a man named Tom Musgrove, and the school was run by a woman named Robin Ducey. Okay. Um, Robin was she was brutal, right? And so like I understand that there are some students, like I just want this to be like really clear, right? Students did, I'm sorry, staff did have their favorite students, right? And those students that they were good to, right? That they don't take away from the fact that the staff was also abusing other students. You follow me, right? And like I said in previous videos, I just want to make it 1000% clear where I stand with staff. None of you did anything, therefore all of you are complicit in the abuse. I also think it's super weird that none of them have made statements regarding the arrest of Paul Gear, right? Not a statement of innocence, not a declaration of innocence. They have said nothing, except Carolyn, who thinks that she will be covering the case. So Robin, the way that the family was set up, right? When I was there were 3 families, right? Each family had 25, 30 students, 6 to 8 staff members. And we had these dividers, right? Because when I was there, it was just the one building, right? Most staff lived on property, right? When I got there, Paul, the pedophile, he lived in the home closest to the school. If you know what the school looks like, the old school, right? The old school is very different than the new school. Paul's was the closest to the school, right? Females dormed under him. So when I got there, I lived beneath this man, and the only thing separating him from a dorm full of female girls was a door, right? Paul and Robin were my family leader at the time. Paul did get married like right before I got there. So he lived there with his wife. Tom and Mary lived on the main road. Bob and Susan lived down the block. Mike and Cindy lived in between the school and the chapel, right? So we had a chapel that students built, right? Up the hill that we would go to. We lived in, when I was there, we lived in trailers that you would not put a dog in, right? Which is super weird because you billed my mom $1,100 for room and board, and there were 15, 16 girls in the trailer. But anyway, let's stay focused. I also do get super distracted sometimes, and a lot of times I'll ignore the comments to finish my train of thought because I don't want anything to distract me from what I'm saying. Right. So when I was there were 3 families. Mine was Paul and Robin. Paul is the pedophile. Family 2 was Tom and Mary. And family 3 was Terry. I don't know who Lindsay. It might have been his wife. We would separate those accordion things that you could like separate rooms with. That's what we used to separate the families during meal times, where we participated in table topics. Okay. Table topics were, let's say a student did something wrong. They would be, you could bring yourself up, but Only people that were really trying to kiss ass did that. You could bring another student up if you had witnessed them do something wrong, right? Something along those lines. Don't mind Charlie. There's multiple animals around. And you would have to answer for whatever that was, right? Looking back at it, right? Nobody wanted to be brought up, right? But there was certainly um, things that were like minor infractions. Like, sure, sometimes students would bring themselves up if they were struggling, right? And that's exactly what it became, right? It was humiliating. Oftentimes, no matter what that offense was, you were it somehow they connected it some way to some type of sexual in nature. I don't know why, right? And I was in Paul's family my first year there, right? I wrote a statement to the FBI, and one of the things that I wrote in my statement was then read during the hearing. And it said something along the lines of like I could remember Paul being, like kids, and I'm not trying to be offensive, but when like if you're bullied in high school, right? Like a lot of those people grow up and become like police officers with a complex. That's the vibe that I got from Paul because he enjoyed the power situation, right? Hi, hey you. You could tell that it was something that he got off on, right? We're talking about a man that would sit in a room full of minors and talk about um, how he was so addicted to sex that he would be masturbating with one hand and have a cheeseburger in the other to a room full of minors, right? And anybody that did not say, "What the fuck is this?" and immediately contact authorities, you're no better. You're no better, right? So Paul was Robin was brutal. I know she's passed, and that's unfortunate because I would like to see her have been held accountable, right? So over time, they expanded, right? They were building the new school. I'm sorry, I'm hot, and I'm not naked. I have clothes on. Um, Over time they expanded the school, right? So when I was there, there was like 100 kids there, right? It was super small. It wasn't, but okay. So the tables, I don't know how many people have read the Jan deposition. Um, but Jan was a writing teacher. He was only there a day. When I was there, like he was there once a week. He was a writing instructor. In that, um, in that deposition, Jan claims that we would be able to deny table topics. We were not able to deny table topics. That was not something that we knew we could do. If you did not stand up, whether you wanted to or not, you are punished, right? I know I didn't talk about this in the interview that I did recently. So a lot of like the day-to-day activities, y'all, I don't remember, right? I remember big events. I remember being restrained. I remember sitting in the corner for 2 months. I remember things like that. Like I don't remember like the day-to-day thing, right? But I was put on a dress down sanction, right? My mom used to send me nice clothes, nice jewelry, and they felt that it was boosting my self-esteem, and they put me on dress down, no makeup, and they made me cut my hair. They would do that often if kids just think of like the most anything that would dehumanize you, right? If a kid was slow or they considered them lazy, that kid would be put on a trotting sanction or double time, right? If they thought that you like if you were argumentative or combative, you anything that somebody told you, you had to answer with yes, thank you. There's a million, and they got creative, right? But as far as denying table topics, that was absolutely never possible. You would be punished, right? And I think that what a lot of people don't necessarily understands, right, is that the school manipulated everybody. I'm gonna, you know what? I'll read the handbook. Um, that way you have a bigger idea of how. Yes. Oh, I saw a question about restraints. Yes. There was a form that parents had to fill out about giving consent to restraint, and then the parents were charged $150 a night every time if there need to be night watch, which if you were in isolation, there was night watch, right? Because they didn't leave you alone. So that's interesting, right? um this is a picture of Paul. I do not know why he is wearing a cheerleading uniform, but he is. So this is a man that was just arrested, right? He's disgusting. This is his house. I wonder if you could see. You can't see. So this was his house on property, right? And you see the door on the side. I'm sorry, it's on the other side. That is the what? Who?
I don't know.
That was the door to the dorm,
I need to leave this place.
right? Hold on. Yeah, so this is the door to the dorm, right? But he lives upstairs. Keep that in mind. Okay, so yes, they did charge your family, and this is what I find so crazy is you're charging my mother 100. The first time I was in isolation, I was there for 5 days, right? A lot happens in that 5 days. You're forced to eat dry tuna, right? You're not getting the food that the other students are getting. You're being punished with food. And in order for me to get out of isolation, I had to eat all of those meals, right? But to charge my mother $150 each night, when remember, I wouldn't doubt that either. Honestly, remember, I'm there for school, right? So why you're taking me out of school because I'm in isolation, right? And then you're charging my mom extra while I'm in isolation. You know what it's truly crazy. Um, so I saw in here there was something about, okay, here we go. It says, a strong emphasis on discipline is an essential feature of the family school. Students are taught that discipline is a cornerstone of a productive work ethic and not merely associated with punishment. So why then did you use sanctions as punishment, right? Call me crazy. They are reminded that following a set regimen or routine not only facilitates accomplishing a given task, but also helps develop an invaluable skill which can then be applied to their personal lives in the future. The staff stresses the fact that whether in academics, householding, personal relationships, or sports, an underlying key to success is discipline. So I think that a lot of people also need to understand the deceptive business practices that go on here, right? They use and rely on propaganda, our chorus, our sports teams, right? Things like that will push to the forefront, right? Because those would what? Those would appetize parents to send their children there. You know what? You follow what I'm saying? So though that's why they kept Paul around, right? That's why they covered for the things that he was doing, right? And they did. To say that you were not aware is not possible, right? Because the girls, I won't discuss the what student is what. There has been multiple civil suits, right? And Paul didn't have a preference. It was whatever he wanted. It was girls, it was boys. There was no, right, which is, if you think about it, right, most of the people like that, right, they have preferences. The fact that he didn't have a preference only makes him more dangerous, right? In order to help students improve their behavior and heighten their sense of discipline, their actions are always met with consequences. They are frequently praised. What? When? They are frequently praised and may be given privileges for behaving when they do not follow directions, they are offered correction in the forms of discussion, step work, and if necessary, the issuance of therapeutic assignments. This was a frequent thing too, where they would make you write stupid shit, right? This high priority on responsibility is upheld in all facets of development from the classroom to around the house. The following general guidelines are in place to help the school run smoothly and protect the rights of students and staff members. I don't believe that we as students had any rights, honestly. Punctual attendance is required by all students at classes and all other scheduled activities. Students are expected to treat faculty and peers with dignity and respect at all times. Any defamation of character is unacceptable. Talking is prohibited in classes and study halls unless students are given permission to speak. The staff examines the factors involved in a behavioral and sometimes seeks the help of other students if the issue is brought up at the table. So I do want to say this, and I know that outside people don't understand, right? And this came up recently in our group, and students were often participating in the punishments, the restraints, the catching of runaways, right? And I know that there are students that feel a lot of guilt for doing that, right? But I think it's important to understand that all of us have different levels of what we could deal with, right? All of us, had to do what we had to do to get by, right? So I don't hold anybody that partook in restraining me, catching me as a runaway. I don't hold that against them. The staff may speak with the student. I'm sorry, I missed the whole sentence. The observations and suggestions may be made by students and given serious consideration. Their input is sometimes clever and enlightening and often helps shape the plan of action implemented by the staff. The staff may speak with the student in order to have him or her commit to changing his or her behavior. If this does not seem to be an effective method, the issuance of step work and/or therapeutic assignments may occur. Written step work and verbal assignments are designated to raise the student's level of personal awareness through the 12 steps. A therapeutic assignment is a corrective plan of action given to a student to help him or her eliminate or reduce his or her negative behavior and increase his or her self-awareness. Step work and therapeutic assignments are carefully formulated on an individual basis. Consideration is given to students' personal strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so let me say this, right? In Jan's deposition, they ask him, were any of these methods reviewed by a psychologist, right? Because I think that over time, we've figured out that these methods don't work, right? It's quite the opposite that children or teenagers, whatever, that are struggling need. They need support. They need guidance. What they don't need is to be humiliated and tortured every day with no way out, right? I think that but this just shows the manipulation, right? And I know that a lot of people don't understand, how could you send your kid away, or how could you know that this place was abusive? How could you send them there knowing this place was abusive? But when I was there was no Google, right? There was nowhere for my mom to go and look to see yikes, this place is a bad place, right? So people from my era of student, right? We didn't have that. We didn't have, our parents only had the propaganda that they were being fed, right? And the staff was incredibly good at manipulating. Like, they covered that base, right? They told our parents that we would say anything to get them to take us out. We're just lawyers and manipulators. We just don't want to be there. We're angry they sent us away and we can't be believed, right? So they already covered the fact that if we were going to go and say something to our parents weren't going to believe us anyway, right? And that's like an important aspect of this, right? Because no parent is, if my mom would have known, my mom would have never left me there, right? Like, but she didn't know. The only thing that she knew is these people were telling her that they had to, like, I had to be there because it was going to save my life. And if I didn't complete the program, I was going to wind up dead in a ditch and prostituting myself. Like, these are the things that they tell the parents, and then playing on the parents' worst fears, right, for profit. There was one that I saw that I wanted to talk about. Okay, punishments. It's crazy. Where is it? I saw it right before I came live. All right, so yeah, we'll do this one. Right, the parent. That's it. That's all they wanted. Yeah. So that's and you know what's crazy, Ivy, is what him saying that is exactly what he was told to say, right? So there's also this manipulation with the staff, right? So those are the things that he heard them say, right? Because that's all it was a regurgitation of what the other they were just mad that they were sent there. Absolutely not, right? Absolutely not. If I really wanted to, I could read your DMs. Hold on one second, please. Sorry, y'all. Now I lost where I was. Okay, so I will, because I know that that's where most of you are coming from, right? He sent me a DM. I was mind blown at the fact that the majority of that DM was talking about his wife's channel. I also cannot share it publicly because there's an open investigation here, right? And anybody that sends me anything with any type of valuable information for that investigation will be forwarded to the appropriate authorities. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But I think that it made me upset, right? Because and I also want to make this pretty clear as well. I don't care about her. I don't mean to come off rude. I really don't, right? But like her being trolled, right? Or hate groups, right? Those people deserve an apology as well. And I know that you're not going to like me saying that, right? But you called them liars. You called them liars because they were asking or telling you about his connection to the school, but they weren't lying, right? And I think that so because I have a lot of experience with hate groups, right? I know how they're formed, right? Hate groups are formed because a creator has done some things wrong and refuses to answer for it, right? So when you're sending me messages about the decline in the channel, that's what I see, right? I'm just being real. I see this woman has done things wrong and she refuses to answer for it. And that's why the channel dies, right? I make mistakes every single day. Every single day. Do you know how many mistakes I've made since the inception of this channel? Do you know why my channel survives those? Because I answer for them. That's why. And it's wild to me, right? How there was I'm trying because I really I had to take them somewhere else, and I really have to tread carefully because of the subject matter of the DM, right? But if you could say the things you said to me, why have you been lying about it for a year? Because you have been lying about it. I've been addressing it in videos, right? You were trying to separate yourself from the allegations, right? And I get it, right? I would really hate to be in that position, right? However, right? However, it's the truth, right? So you could separate yourself from the sexual allegations and all of that stuff, right? But what you can't do is say that you did not know about abuse. You can't do that. You can't separate yourself from the other types of abuse, which were very in the open, right? And then you bring on, you talk about how no kid would say that you did that, but they would, right? But they have, right? And you could say that you don't remember the instance with, I'm not going to say his name, but you putting the kid by his neck. You could say that you don't remember that, but that only makes you look worse, right? Because we don't forget. I could tell you what staff member did what to me in what form, right? 25 years later. We don't forget those things, right? And the fact that you would only show that your memory needed to hold on to. Why? That's a big event. You physically assaulting a child is something that you should remember, right? And if you don't remember it, right, my first question is why? Because from where I'm sitting, it's kind of appears to me because it was an all the time thing, right? It was an all the time thing, right? And even that is incorrect though, my crazy life, right? Because it couldn't have been. It couldn't have been, right? And you also, so somebody also posted a yearbook, right? And in that, it's pretty interesting. Um, in this handbook, there was punishments. Hold on, that's what consequences. Ready? Consequences. The following is a partial list of consequences that we have found to be effective in helping students improve their behavior. Effective how? That's what I want to know. Extra chores. A student may be given extra chores to complete in addition to those normally required. So every day we would get up, we would have 3-minute cold showers, right? We would then go to Saturdays was cleaning crew day. We cleaned the entire property, right? Sometimes they would put you on dish crew, which is exactly what it sounds like, right? Buddy. When a student is given a buddy, he or she is closely watched and monitored by a responsible peer throughout the day. When schedules conflict, the buddy may delegate someone else to temporarily fill in. So buddy is a lot like shadow, right? So when you first get there, you're on buddy. You're also on blackout with your entire family for 30 days, sometimes 3 months. It depends on each student's. Blackout is no communication, right? So when I was there, I was on blackout with boys. my entire stay. And I was on blackout with everyone 6 months or under because I was considered negative, right? Um, wait, where's the other page? How did I? It must have uploaded different. I'm sorry, I'm looking. Focus discussions, the table. This was interesting. You know what's interesting about it? This is not factual. In addition to many therapeutic venues present at the family, focused discussions are an integral part of the comprehensive recovery program. Focused discussions are held at the table during any meal for the purpose of discussing and reinforcing the principles at the Family Foundation School. Question: how come y'all don't have those principles? Just wondering. Focused discussions draw on daily events of the school in order to discuss the value of certain principles: honesty, purity, unselfishness, integrity. Where is it? It's weird. Isn't that weird? These occurrences are used to exemplify how certain principles were either followed or disregarded. The benefits of following the principles of the family are demonstrated through these focused discussions. Since they are conducted informally and do not necessarily direct attention towards specific students are less likely to feel challenged and may be more receptive to considering the ideas posed. Students who have difficulty sharing at the table are given what the fuck? Students at the table, I'm sorry, sharing at the table are given the opportunity to learn through ricochet, the process of indirectly identifying with others who are speaking. First of all, I think that if a girl, now think about it, right? Most of the kids when I was there were between 15 and 17, 18, right? There were a few kids younger, but for the most part, we were all high school students, right? The families were co-ed at the time I was there too. I know that they separated later on, but they didn't do that back then. Let's say you made eye contact with a boy, right? That's a table topic. So it's also what would be considered a negative contract, right? Negative contract means we did something wrong and somebody has to get up and break that negative contract, right? When I got sent to the family, I had a boyfriend for like 2 years, right? I wasn't a whore, right? I was in a long-term relationship, but somehow that's where it goes to, right? It also comes to like, you're going to use your body to make money. It truly is madness. There is no focus there, right? There is no none of that. There's no focus, and it is always a humiliation session. That's what I call it, right? There were students, teenage boys, that would have to stand up and talk about their masturbation habits in front of an entire room. Now, I don't know about y'all, but that has like the opposite effect in my mind, right? Humiliation is never going to make somebody feel secure, right? It's never going to it's never going to happen, right? Right. It's like sexual harassment. It is. It's truly it's unfortunate too, right? Um because oh, I like this one. Y'all like this one. It's talking about the staff. The staff members of the family are diverse in their personal areas of expertise and experience. Their diversity, however, is collectively anchored by a wholehearted belief and support in the 12 steps. Additionally, the following characteristics hold true for most members of the staff. Each has endured some form of serious personal difficulty in his or her life as part of the ongoing recovery process from it seeks to help others in need of similar assistance. Each lives his or her life on a spiritual basis. Each supports family unity and the traditional family values. Parents are the leaders of the family. Children do not have an equal say. Adolescents are ultimately responsible for their actions and their lives in general, regardless of childhood difficulties. Adolescents should not be inundated with handicap labels, yet should be encouraged and expected to develop in the best way they can. Each staff member is dynamic and creative in his or her niche. Underlying and anchoring any specific job description at the family is a duty of all staff members to support and model certain universal principles contained in the family school's philosophy. Interesting. These principles include the four absolutes of love, honesty, purity, and unselfishness. Interesting, right? These principles contain many practical implications. The following section specifies many of the essential concepts and describes some of the ways in which the staff acts as a surrogate family for the students. Tony and Betty Argyros are the head of households. They represent the parents of the house. They have the final say on all matters and do not have to explain themselves to students. So I've seen few table topics with Tony. Betty didn't get as active, but Tony was brutal. Tony would sit there and talk about how he was a pimp, how he and his wife are having the best sex of their life in their 60s. It was super inappropriate. Screaming in girls' faces, right, that they only knew how to use their bodies. Absolutely disgusting, right? These roles are not fixed and necessarily depend on each other's staff members' sex, age, general background, and personality. The student's individuality will also play a role in the development of their relationship with staff members. Older brother and sister roles are also assumed by the staff, as well as those of less directly involved in aunt or an uncle. So they did when I was there, right? In certain places. They did. So oh wow. I didn't hear about it, but I've been so wrapped up like with this stuff. It's been crazy. They did recruit staff from Eastridge. They knew a lot of they knew each other, most of them through Eastridge. I often say this, right? Because anytime a student was restrained, they filmed it. Right. So I want to know where those videos are. You know what I'm saying? As the new school was built, I do believe they put cameras in like more sections. But when I was there, I really only remember them in the office. This is what Paul Gear looked like then. Isn't that crazy? Still looks fucking creepy. So the school psychologist meets with each student individually soon after his or her arrival. When I never saw a psychologist, I was there for 18 months, something like 470 days. I didn't see a psychologist one time. I do know that this came up in the interview that I did on Brandy's channel. They did remove somebody posted in the group a release that they decided what meds students would be on, and they also had a problem with so you figure a lot of kids that were there were either ADHD or they had been on ADHD medications because they were trying to narrow down what the issue was, right? They were all removed. I didn't find that out until the other day. Parental authorization for physical restraint. In the event that my minor child / ward, because there were people there as like foster kids, right? Attempts to run away from the family, I authorize Education Plus Corp to physically restrain him or her. Education Plus Corp is the corporation that they opened, right? I understand that appropriate behavior management techniques will be used. Okay. What's appropriate? That's what I want to know. Is appropriate punching a kid in the face, sitting on them for hours? Is that appropriate? I don't think that that's appropriate. I don't think that psych hospitals would consider that an appropriate method of restraint, right? That's just me. So I do want to know, and maybe it's because no, we didn't see psychologists. So prickly pear, this was when I was there. Oh, I have it. Hold on, because I could go through. Somebody sent me a PDF of the yearbook, right? From when I was there. So I could tell you exactly how many student teachers were hold on, I'm looking for it. How many students or teachers were certified, right? Because I know that for a fact, Mary Musgrove taught me biology and she is not a teacher, right? Fact. So that too, as well. I know that there were kids there ordered by a judge. That's one of the things that I was talking to Mayor about, right? Because right now, if you are on like an IEP or you're sent by a school district, they're receiving funding, right? Which is granted, the family is not open anymore. They did wrap kids in blankets until the new school completed, right? Because once the new school completed, they built quiet rooms and it was just like a padded room with the camera. So they did build quiet rooms, but for years, right, 1984 or 82 to 98, they absolutely wrapped children in duct tape blankets. Somebody was talking about inside and outside shoes, because when I was there, we had outside and inside shoes, right? For obvious reasons, it would be super muddy, and in the winter it would be just snow. We had shoes that we wore outside, right? And then we would come into like the boot closet and put our inside shoes on. The school did receive government grants, and that's one of the things that I was talking to him about is how do we remove that, right? And what he told me to do, right? Because they're it's not that they don't have oversight, they do have a governing uh body, right? Department of Safety. He told me honestly to just contact start calling DHS to different programs. But we know that the family was investigated and no abuse was found, which is how is that possible, right? And that's another thing is that like I know people think, well, why didn't you say something to the parents that were coming on tours, right? We were conditioned to smile, right? We were we I don't want I know that brainwash sounds like a weird. I'm trying to find the picture of the staff. I think it was 2010, which let's be real, like they were super close to closing at that point in time, right? Um and there was another one because that's another problem I have, right? Like students did leave and call somebody, right? Like it was reported, right? But nothing ever happened, right? The cops would bring us back, right? And here's my thing. When Tony and Betty stepped down, Mike Argyros took over, right? He is like Hancock's on like the council of the town. Like these people truly have no idea that like this man he abused children, right? Like they would bring us back. Okay, so here we go. It's really awful. Student advisor. So this is Paul's wife, who was not at the hearing, which I do find super interesting, right? Student advisors were like who you would go to read a fourth step, right? This woman is she is Bob's daughter. Bob has passed away. She is named in the most recent lawsuit. Now, so let's see about this. Mary Musgrove, okay, she actually looks good here. She's super old now. She was my teacher. No degree, came from Eastridge, right? I do think that Mary, that English teacher, did have a degree, right? Jan Charipko did have a degree, and Pat Brown, who was my Spanish teacher, had a degree. But the majority, so this is what the old school looked like, right? This is the old school. That's all that was there, right? Right. And see, that's the thing that like that's what I try to explain, like why um I don't hold it against them, right? Like students that did participate in my table topics or sat on me to restrain me, I don't hold that against them, right? Some might, I don't, right? And that's another thing too, right? Somebody was talking. So for those of you that don't know, Liz Iannelli, she is a trauma therapist. Um, and she talks a lot about how we stay in fight or flight long after the school, right? And it's unfortunate. This is Tony and Betty. It was. It truly was. And I know, right? The girls that I was friends with like my whole life, right? They don't even get it, right? So I understand that it's super hard to wrap your head around, right? And I think for like the first 3 or 4 years that you get out, your mind is still so mushy, right? Like you have to unlearn all the things that you learned because it wasn't taught to you helpful, right? And I understand that there are people that say the family school saved my life, right? But those are almost always later generation kids, right? They didn't have the experience that us older kids had. And there was absolutely there is a lot of narcissistic ties there, right? The love bombing is a thing, right? It does, and ultimately it's a trauma bond, right? And that's why we have students that still try to protect staff, right? Because that's my thing. None of them were good. None of them were good. Um, None of them. They can all mm, trying to be nice, right? They can all get fucked and stay fucked as far as I'm concerned. Behavioral infractions. The following list is some behavioral infractions: threatening or acting out physical violence, possession of use or drugs, sex or any public subordination or disrespectful conduct, defamation of character, including vulgarity and profanity, stealing, cheating, plagiarism, flirting, which is fucking normal for teenage children, right? Incomplete homework assignments, incomplete chores or work assignments, lateness to class or other work activity, inappropriate dress or grooming, poor athletic performance. So also this is super important. So in New York, we like New York students need Regents diplomas, right? So we essentially have to take tests in each subject. Normally, I'm talking outside the boarding school, right? You have to take a test in each subject in order to get a Regents diploma. The family would make you take 3 qualifiers, right? So this was a way that they kept students back, right? In New York at the time, I think passing on a Regents exam was like 65. It might be different now. I'm not 100% sure. The family would make you take 3 qualifiers. The average of those 3 qualifiers had to be above 75 because that's what was passing in the school. And if you did not get above a 75, you were unable to take that test no matter what class track you were on. Correct. Correct. And it's I know it's crazy, right? But it's true. Here we go. Loss of home visit. I never went on a home visit. That it all comes down to money. It all comes down to money. Loss of home visit. The only time that I went home is when I ran away and I got to the city and I slept at home and my mom drove me back the next morning, right? A student may have the recommendation for a home visit delayed or canceled due to low academic performance or other inappropriate behavior. If a student gets below 65 on the monthly report card, he or she is not recommended for a home visit that month. This time should be used to study so that his or her grades are improved. If a student gets below a 75 on a report card, he or she could go home for one night visit only on the weekends, again, in order to get more study time. This policy applies to weekends and holiday visits. Phone blackout. A student is not allowed to use the phone for a set or indefinite period of time. So I know that my mom struggled during blackout periods as well, right? So my mom was a single mom and she had me at 16, right? So my entire life, it was always us, right? So she was also having trouble, trying to get through that. Mail blackout. A student is not allowed to send or receive mail for a set or indefinite period of time. In my experience, if you're on blackout, you're on blackout. You get no mail, you get no phone calls, period. $100 community service. I never even heard of this, but it's in the handbook. $100 community service is given for any instance of cheating or stealing. A student receiving this is required to do extra work at the family at the current rate of minimum wage until his or her accumulated wage reaches $100. This is completed over several weeks or a few minutes or hours at a time while other students are having recreation. I never even heard of that. So Christmas, I didn't go home for Christmas. Students were allowed to leave over Christmas break. I didn't go home for Christmas, and what they would do is you would pick a student's name, right? And out of like a basket or whatever, that student you got to go shop for. They would take us to the mall. The student would put like 3 things that they wanted. Our parents provided the funds, and we went to the mall to get them the gifts that they wanted. What I will say is when I was there, we didn't go on many outings, but that did pick up later on. Like as the families grew, they were given they did go on more outings. The only thing that I did while I was there is we went to Virginia Beach for a choir concert. Because again, those were the things that the school relied on to bring more students in, right? And that's why Paul was able to operate as long as Paul was able to operate. They knew because one of the girls that went to report it, instead of them going and taking care of it, they threw sanctions on the girl. They knew. So when I was there was like 100. You could, but it was minimal, right? Like anytime a student got spoiled or received nice things, they really tried to knock that student down a few pegs in different ways. Time out. If a student is blatantly defiant, despite several attempts by the staff to elicit cooperation, the student will sit in an isolated part of the living room until he or she cools down. The student may then approach the staff to request permission to rejoin the house. So this would normally be in the corner, right? And I don't know about that. Like you would have to then bring yourself up again to ask if you were able to get out of the corner. Like you couldn't just get out of the corner. You had to have permission, and it always had to be the next meal before you would get out. And they could say no. Student teacher ratio. When I was there, I don't think maybe I got to 100 student, and there was about 20 staff. They did. So when I left the school, I just walked away, and I left with nothing but the clothes that I had on my body. And when they sent my belongings, the only thing they really sent was a comforter. They didn't really send my belongings. This decision is made by the staff with the input of the student body. Permission is always granted if the student publicly commits to change his negative behavior and makes necessary amends. That is not true. There were multiple times that I requested to get out of the corner, and they said no. I'm sure. Well, what can they do, right? That's the table. I'm looking for. There was something else that I saw in here that I wanted to talk about. So when I was there, correct? Yeah, there's no way. There's no way. But like, here's the thing: Enchanted, it was open. It was all in the open. There is no denying. If you sat at a table topic, you watched those children get humiliated. You know what I'm saying? There is no denying that you knew at a very minimum verbal abuse. Right? Exactly. Exactly. So when you run away, like they'll take your shoes, right? Somebody recently asked about taking socks. I've never seen that. I do know that they took your shoes away, um, and that was that. I do know that. So the way that they viewed medication, right? Um, it was mind altering, and they were against anything of mind altering. Um, uh, oh, this is the graduation requirements. I'm trying to find the rules. Hold on. They had what was called exile. Exile was you couldn't talk to anybody. You could talk to staff, but as far as the student population, you could not talk to anybody. Which, if you think about it, right, like if a student is like feeling isolated, and why would you cut them off? It's just completely backwards. You know what I'm saying? Um, I can say that there are multiple. I'm hoping that more charges are coming, right? So because we know that there are students that have disclosed, right? I don't know because they were so fundamentally against drugs. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think that that was ever a thing, right? Because it was absolutely, that's one thing that I can say, right? But there has been staff that have relapse, right? And if you think about it, right? I don't know who's in recovery, who's not. I am in recovery. If you are an addict, right? And you're, I personally, right? I don't work a program. Have I done step work and completed the steps? I have, but I currently do not work a program, right? If I was watching the things that were going on in this place, right? How can you say that you have solid recovery? Because you can't, right? Because one of the basic principles for recovery is accountability, honesty, right? So there is no way that a staff member didn't know. Oh, against, right. It's crazy. It's crazy. I actually talk about this. I'm almost done writing a book. And in the book, I talk about how, like, my formative years, 16, 17, right, where I should have been learning healthy boundaries with with the opposite sex, right? I was unable to communicate with them, right? That led to like ripple effects through my adult years, like unhealthy relationships with men, right? Like these are the things that, like, I don't think that they thought of, but weren't they supposed to? Right. And what's even more strange is the entire time that I was there, I was unable to communicate with male students. And I have a better bond with them than I do with others. Right. Yeah, everybody knew. But here's the thing now, right? When I was reading the Jan deposition, right, that's what really opened my eyes to it. So in the deposition, they asked him about the rock sanctions, right? Rock sanctions meant you were literally to pick up a pile of rocks and carry it from point A to point B back and forth, right? And in that, he says, well, it's supposed to be used as a time of reflection. A time of reflection? I can assure you that the only thing that that student is doing is in their head going, fuck you, fuck them, fuck this place. They're not reflecting, right? Because you have to remember that, like, the majority of infractions were not even something major. Don't get me wrong. There were certainly situations that were like blatantly fucked up. There weren't like fights, right? Like, we didn't get into fights. Like, we just didn't do stuff like that. So like most of this shit was really stupid in nature, right? It wasn't. It's super hard to explain, right? Exactly. And that was a real thing, right? Like there were students getting they would get injured, right? And so this is another thing that I wanted to talk about. Um, as far as the suicide and overdose rate, right? Obviously, we cannot pin it on the school, right? We can't do that. But we can absolutely state that there is a connection there, right? Because what we know about complex PTSD, right? And just from our own experiences, you suffer, right? Because at this point, they should have, right, been there, and instead of tearing us down more, right? And when you get out of there, it's a good, like, I would say 3 to 5 years, right, where you're just in like this fog, right? And it takes a while for the dust to settle, right? I know their biggest flex was like the college acceptance rate, but what they don't talk about is the amount of students that relapse, become homeless. Like, students do struggle, right? And I know that one could make the argument, right, that, oh, we were troubled teens to begin with, right? You don't add trauma to that, right? You don't. Adding trauma onto trauma doesn't have a good prognosis, right? Now, do we know? So we can't. When I was listening to Paul's hearing, they said that, right? Like, it's wildly speculative to blame Paul for the suicide rate, right? But what we absolutely know is that they didn't help our situation at all. They only compounded it, right? And without doing work, right, to go through that, it resurfaces, right? And that's one of the things that frustrated me so badly with Jimmy's DMs, right? Because we remember, right? We don't forget who did what. It just doesn't happen, right? And a lot of the people that have taken their own lives, like, they were successful, right? They were nurses. There were people that did come through and get to the other side, right? There's but there is a strong correlation between the school and suicide, and that is something that just can't be denied, right? It is. It's awful. It's really sad. There was a student. It was after I left. Um, I went back to Staten Island and lived my life, right? And one of my friend's little brothers, he was having some trouble. And she looked at me and she said, "What was the name of the school that you went to? I think they just sent my brother there." And she said the name, and I said, "Get him out. Get him out. Get him out now." Unfortunately, her parents did not listen. And he had a really hard time. And like that, there's another student that went. I was there with her little sister wound up coming in a couple of years later, and there was an accident on 97, which is like the road, I think, that's there. And 3 or 4 students passed away. And the sister, who was my age, wound up committing suicide years later, 20 years later. Like, there's no way to tell, right? And unfortunately, when we have people like Mike Argyros, right, who just says, or Jimmy, right? I wish they'd move on. Unfortunately, it's not that easy on this side of things, right? And I think the statements like that are incredibly disrespectful. They are not taking into y'all know what happened there. So like I'm super confused why instead of just being like, shit, I fucked up. You're right. I should have reported something. I should have did something, but I needed a paycheck to feed my family. I would have a little bit more respect if you at least said that, but to blatantly ignore and to lie and try to distance yourself, that's never going to get anywhere with me. It doesn't. It really doesn't. So I don't know, to be honest. Hi, Rosebud. I don't know. I think that it's hard for me to say, right? I think that they, it's just always where it went, and it's a very like Freudian. You know what I'm saying? It's really strange, honestly. Right. And so Kenzo, I mean, I know you know this about me, right? Like that would go a long way with me. There are staff members that have come to me and sincerely apologized. Those are the ones that I keep on my Facebook. But even then, I don't have everyday conversations with. We don't talk on a regular basis, right? I just don't do that. Yeah, that's what it looks like. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it's unfortunate, right? Because you see I was looking, I was trying to find the tax records, right? Because if you think about it, it was like, hey, it was like all told, it was a little over 5,000 a month. In 97. In 97. Okay. Never mind like incidentals that came up and had to be paid for, right? Another thing was the medical component, right? We were not taking to a doctor unless we were like dying, right? I had mono. I got mono while I was there, and it was a solid 3 days before I was taken to a doctor to see a doctor. And we used to call this room the new room, right? It was just like kind of like a living room with like couches and stuff. And I just laid in there for days before they brought me to a doctor. It's truly like crazy. It is not normal, right? But it's all, it's so crazy. No, no, no. It was absolutely like it's a very systemic issue, right? Um, it was, they knew they were raking in money. Oh, he did. Somebody said that to me, actually. Somebody said that they were still Facebook friends until very recently, which is weird, right? Because if you didn't like them or fuck with him, why is he on your okay? Why is he on your Facebook friends list? No, no. So when I was there, right? I don't know about later on, right? But then, absolutely not. There was no nurse. I actually said this on Brandy's interview when I was there. There was like a med closet, right? And it was like in the room of family one, and the woman who her name was Christine, she gave out meds, and she had no no medical training. She wasn't a nurse. She gave out meds. So there are people that have gone between the family and Elon, actually. Yes, yes. That didn't happen when I was there. That was after. I do know that we had a dog. We had dogs that would roam around, whether they were staff's dogs or, one of the dogs' names was Petey, and he was like this fat brown dog. He was fat, y'all. But that was like the highlight of my day, right? Because you're seeking some type of bright spot, right? And Tom and Mary had a couple of golden retrievers when I was there, but they weren't animals. But that's a very real thing, and that could be traumatic, right? Yeah, that's weird. Same. I'm super protective over my Facebook, but that's because of what I did on the internet, I wanted to protect. It's my most personal, and people on the internet could be weird, right? So like I wanted to protect my family. So I don't know. I will say this, Calamity. I have not been able to get a solid years, right? I do know that his LinkedIn said 2018 or 2013, somebody told me. But a student messaged me yesterday. Yes. A student messaged me yesterday. Hold on, let me get the exact. I don't want to fuck it up. Um, Hold on, I'm sorry. Okay. I promise you, he was there my entire time. He was already there in March of '06. So, this is a student that watched my my videos that I've been posting. Um, Thank you for keeping me in the loop. Hold on, I dropped him the video. Yo, what the fuck? This is a student. If you're watching, Carolyn, this is what a student says. Okay. Yo, what the fuck is she even saying about what's happening to her children? Whoa, triggered hearing Jimmy say that shit. Wait, he said he was only there for 3 years because I was '06 to '08 and he was there the whole time. She goes, oh my God, the baby voice. What is that? Doing the Lord's work. Thank you. Okay. These are students. These are students that are offended by the things that you have said about the school. Okay. Just so you know. Also, let me go back to that text message because you wanted me to. A girl from a wilderness program will be live with Kendall Saturday at 9 on TikTok. Can you drop the link to your TikTok in the chat? Right. So I haven't been able to get a accurate um an accurate years that he was there. I've tried. I've asked students if they're there with them. I've tried, but I can't get, you know what I'm saying? So I did speak to it closed already, Enchanted. Um there was another one filed in November. I'm hearing that they're gonna open it up again. I'm hoping that they're gonna open it up again because I wasn't aware that you could use I wasn't there for him, no. I wasn't um I didn't know that you could use abuse in general. I was under the impression that it had to be sexual abuse, right? I later found out after it closed, but I did speak to an attorney last Saturday, and they're supposed to speak to their team and call me back because that's what I would ultimately want to do. But I do think that they did very well hiding their money, right? I do think that so they sold the property. Anybody that doesn't know, it's a camp now. Like it has a skate park and a pool. We didn't have a pool. We were forced to swim in that pond that um w- mm, I at the school. He did teach, if I remember correct, science, maybe math. He was not a music teacher. Just so that's clear. I know that there's been some questions about that. He did play music. Like on the weekends, we had like cleaning crews on Saturday, and then on Sundays, like we did have some free time. And I would imagine that he used to sit by the pond and play guitar. Like that did happen, right? So I don't think that he was teacher. Like Paul handled all things music. That's just what I heard. Um, oh, really? Yeah, no, I do want to oh, thank you. I just so yeah, if this is gonna trigger anybody, I that's not my intention. Um, but I think that the subject matter can be heavy, right? I think that the past 2 weeks, this is what's weird about trauma, right? I started, this is what's crazy. All right. In April, it's Child Abuse Prevention Month, right? I really this was not what I did. I didn't talk about the school. Um it would come up here and there, but it was not like the highlight of my content, right? And school in Jamaica, and it being, Child Abuse Prevention Month, I decided that I would do a series. I didn't expect for on the third day Paul to get arrested, right? Um, Paul getting arrested, it's such an awkward emotional roller coaster, right? Because we really, when I was listening to the hearing, um, the state's attorney, right, hearing her validate everything, it just, there's no words to explain, right? So obviously we're all super happy that, like, finally we're getting somewhere, right? Because this has been a long, long time, right? But it also kicks up all of the trauma, right? And a lot of people, I think that I'm not really a crier, right? Like, that's not something that I do regularly. My mom passed away in January. Um, I am in my mom's house tying up some loose ends because I do have teenage siblings, right? And I promised my mom that I would stay here 3 months and get something. I didn't expect Paul to get arrested, right? Um, I was actually doing a live and talking about it, trying to, like, elaborate on the videos that I had posted, and I literally clicked out of my live, and it was the first post was his mugshot, right? So there are a lot of students. It's you're happy, right? Like, obviously you're happy, but the emotions of everything that is now being front and center, right? It can get overwhelming. And when the hearing first started, I was like, Paul's attorney is not capable of this case, and that's evident. Um, but I was like, oh God, like, this lawyer is an idiot, right? And then when the state attorney started speaking, I had created, like, a side chat so that the ones that were going to be on the phone had a place to talk, right? Because it can be super overwhelming. And so we had that and I was just like, it was just crazy when the state's attorney started speaking and talking. The chat was just lit up. Yes, thank God she gets it finally, and, like, there's really no words to explain the way that we feel about it, right? Um, there is no, it is just, some days you're up, some days you're down. It's just the nature of it, right? Um, right. And exactly. I think that that's a big thing too, right? Because you got to remember, for 20 years we've been called liars and manipulators and discredited, and they publicly would say, "Oh, this isn't true. They're just mad about the experience," right? But they get it, right? And she did the justice, like, that she did. And then they got 75 statements written in 4 days. Okay. 4 days. 75 students wrote statements. That, yeah, and so their whole thing was like divide and conquer, right? That's why we had senior members, right? That's why you were never comfortable to go and talk to somebody about the way you felt, because you were afraid of the punishment, right? They can't take us all together, right? And that's kind of where we are. Like, even if you do not, obviously some alumni have issues with other 40 of us in the room, in the courtroom, and there was 45 on the phone. And when I messaged Liz Iannelli that night, she said there were 45. We could see the numbers, and it was truly amazing to see, right? Because we've waited so long for something like this, right? Somebody to just validate us. Don't tell us that we're mad. Don't tell us that you just want us to get over it, which was actually Mike Argeros's comment in the First Times article. No, validate the situation, right? Take Acknowledge the fact that you caused harm, right? Because that's all that we really wanted. Let's be real. What can we do about it, right? At the point in time, and this is another thing, is that by the time a student gets their shit together in their mind, the statute of limitations is up, right? So there was never them opening that window was the best thing that could have happened to us, honestly. It is. It is so awful. Um, and I was thinking about that in the chat when we were in the chat. I was thinking we're just one school, right? Like all the trauma, all the pain, all of the, like the ripple effects, lost people, right? Like that is just one really crazy to think about. It's truly crazy. I know. I heard it. I know. I heard it. And I was just like, that's one of the things that bothers me more than anything. That's one of the things that piss me off. That statement, get over it. You don't get to tell us to get over it, right? Especially without acknowledging what we're so mad about, right? It's infuriating. Well, and see, that's so Enchanted. That's what really don't speak about it at all, right? Because up until now, right, they haven't been able to be honest about it, right? And now they're in a position where if you're honest about it now, you look like a liar, right? It should just not, especially like, we've already been abused for profit, right? Don't do it. Don't do it, right? This is not a chance to revive your channel. This is not a, uh, it's not gonna be your break, right? That's not what this is gonna be. To the situation, I've made that aware publicly. If you don't want me to, I won't. But so like I said, I had started posting a series on TikTok about the family, and I received a comment one morning from Nicole. Can I say who you are? I don't want to say if you don't want me to. Yes, they did. They did. A lot of people, so we're in this position. So she was Paul's neighbor. And one morning I woke up and there's a comment. He was my neighbor for 7 years and I'm sick, right? Because the school did a very good job of making it look like we were the problem to the neighbors, right? The school made everybody, we were troubled teens. We were hardened criminals. This is the new thing, guys. So Paul's location is being hidden. They haven't released where he is, right? Right? Are you gonna like fund it, like are you gonna pay my therapist bill for like the trauma that you'll cause? Like, is that gonna be you? Because I don't think it's gonna be you. Right, Nicole. And that's the thing, right? There is no denying it now. It is fucking everywhere. Okay. But they are keeping us hidden. They're keeping him hidden. Obviously, because it's a federal case, he will go to a federal corrections institute, but that's not where he is right now. But she was his neighbor and she had no idea, right? Because if you think about it, normal people aren't actively going through Pacer to read about a cases, right? You don't really notice that until your attention is brought to it. And so here's the crazy thing. That day that his arrest was made public on TikTok, oh Lord, I will never. Um, I was talking about the law in New York and how the opening the statute of limitations and allowing people to file, right? There was a loophole. These people weren't going to be having to register as sex offenders. That was the topic of my live that day, right? Trying to figure out a way that these people that are losing these civil cases, how do you make the crossover to make them have to register as a sex offender? But I didn't have to worry about it because there he was. It's crazy. There are students that have done 10 years in prison, 15 years in prison, right? Um, and I did ask one of the kids that were there with me. He was in the military. He's made a military career of this situation. Um, and I asked him if he wanted to come on because the students that went on to go into the military, they say that the military was a cakewalk. So doesn't that prisoners are treated better? They are. Nicole, I'm not sure. Do you live in Hancock or Callicoon? And is it like front page news where you are? Because I see the articles. I could see that there's been multiple articles written. And but why are none of the staff members making statements? None of them. Just, Mike Argyros, like you got nothing to say, buddy. Oh, oh, it's not real. Oh, we're crazy, right? But this is somebody that lives in Hancock, right? And it just goes to show you how they make you think that we're the liars, right? We and I can't say much, but there are other students. There are other students claiming that this man sexually assaulted them that are crazy. It's crazy. I know. And so we do appreciate it. I've been talking to students about the situation and they read the comments, right? And that is so refreshing, right? Because that's not what we're used to. We're used to them saying things like that. This isn't real. This never happened. You guys need to get over it, right? I know that's right, knitting. I know that's right. Yeah. So I did speak to that's why I was late. I was on the phone with my friend who was a mayor, and I was asking him, like, where do we start? Who owns the local paper? The Argyros do? Can you email me? Right. So Ivy, and that's another thing that oh, do they really? Oh, Cindy Argyros. Uh, I need to write that down because that needs to be remembered. I don't think that we knew that. But I did. So the other day I was doing some Mike Argyros is the current board of Hancock Partners, which is fucking weird. Vice president and treasurer. Isn't that great? Yeah, I'm gonna work on that. So that's how it is, right? That's exactly what it is. I have to answer this and I have to pee, but I will be right back. Oh shit. But that's assets. I don't think that students knew that. Wow. Um, that's crazy. I'm gonna, but I came across. I didn't know that they owned it. Who's Carly? I don't know who Carly is. That's crazy. I didn't know that. But so that's one of the things. My brother's in the shower, so you can hear music. That's one of the things that I always, cause all right, the property that the family was on, right? Um, Bob and Susan's house was down the road. Paul and Diane's house was like on the property. Mike and Cindy's house was up by the chapel, and Tom and Mary's house was down the block. But I don't know if it was all one property. I don't know if it was sold as one property, right? I do know that they sold it to French Woods, and I've been trying to find. I've been trying to find tax records, anything that would give me a number, right? Because we know that they bought the movie theater. They bought something else. I can't remember what it was, but they did buy something else. But it is. But I'm more focused on the asset part of it, right? Because why is my ear ringing? They knew this was coming, right? So there's already been, I think, 3 settlements. I might be wrong. There might be 4, but there's already been multi-million-dollar settlements, right? And granted, you're suing the corporation, right? But I think that I did some digging yesterday about it. So there's 1, 2, 3. Here's 4 right here. That's just Paul. But the ones that New York Education Corp, they're named, right? So I really want to but I think it's between 3 and 5 million, the payouts that have happened so far. This case is closed, dismissed. I don't know who this is because it says plaintiff, and I don't know who that is, but they might have given them. There are. So that's right. That's where why I was talking to Maya, right? Because I know that the family was reported and investigated, and they cleared that investigation. No evidence of abuse. But it was done late. It wasn't done when I was there, right? Yeah, that's crazy. I wonder who wrote the article. Is she still here? Let me see if I could pull it up. Cindy, when I was there, was the social studies, like the history teacher. Right, it is. That's what I'm saying. So they did really well to hide their money. No, absolutely not. And so I know somebody mentioned Ruby Frankie before. It's the same shit, right? And that's why I was so like the live that I was watching where Carolyn was attacking the student, right? She then went on to talk about Jody Hildebrandt and I was like, you don't see it? You don't see it? Because it's evident, right? That they are very similar. And it's unfortunate, but that's how I was thinking. Like I was like, you didn't see it? No, she didn't see it. But he did say that she didn't know what was going on, which is, I don't believe that. Just so you know, like just so we're clear, I don't believe that. So you have to remember that, like, I was manipulated by staff for a while, right? So it doesn't necessarily work for me. It doesn't work for me. The website sucks, I'll tell you that. Oh yeah, she was Cindy actually was a nice staff member. She wasn't she wasn't bad. I do agree with that, right? Because it's crazy. I don't think that she should be the one to talk about this though. And that's just not gonna change. Um as far as I'm concerned, right? Yeah, she did. So Paris Hilton is like we couldn't ask for better coverage, right? And she has the platform and the means, right, to bring real change, and that's what we need, right? Is actual change. I'm sorry, I'm trying to see who wrote this article because if it's Cindy, I'm just gonna die right here and now because that would be crazy. I gotta subscribe. Because I just can't. I can't. Um. This is annoying. Right, and I'm like, that's the crazy thing. How did you not see it? Should I use my real name and let them see my? uh I'm sorry. Hold on. Wait, why do I have to give my address? This is weird. Interesting. But like maybe they should issue a press release on this situation and just apologize, right? Apologies go a long way. And I think I'm not putting my address here. Do I have to? I'll do it later. So Paris also there are students Bill, which I still haven't read, go to Jamaica. She went to Jamaica. Um, those kids, like that's something that we always wanted, right? We always dreamed like somebody was going to come and rescue us, right? Because when you're in that position, you just can't fathom that this is real life. Like all of these things are happening, and you're just like, it truly is such a clusterfuck, honestly. So they did it during Paul's hearing, he actually still had a he had a website that he would um bring he was advertising music lessons. Still, the day that he went for his hearing, he was still advertising teaching children music, and that was pulled that day. I do obviously, I'm super interested to know if there are other students outside of the family, right? Because he did have experience with children for a very long time afterwards, right? So there's got to be, or did he only sexually assault family school kids because he knew he was safe there, right? And I think personally that they should all be charged with conspiracy, right? Because everybody knew, everybody. There was nobody that did was put on harsh sanctions just for talking about it, right? Because that was their response to everything was sanctions, um, punishment, 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 right? I do know that there's been students trying to reach out to the family of Tom, the student um, that did commit suicide while he was there, right? Because that is an incredible amount of negligence, right? That student should have been brought to a psychiatric facility, right? Because he was crying out for help. And instead of doing that, you put him on double shadow, and that didn't do anything, did it? And then you lied to the parents about the situation, which is absolutely fucking disgusting because those parents deserve the truth, right? Didn't they pay you enough for it? It's wild. He did. He did. I'm hoping, right? Like obviously the feds aren't going to tell us that. But I do know that they are. I got your email, Nicole, just when I end Alienza. Um it is I know of other students and I know that there's things going on, right? but whether he could be charged, the statute of limitations really hangs us up, right? I think that the only reason why he was able to be charged is because of the trafficking side of it, right? Now that they have, I'm hoping, right? We hope, and I know that there are students that are talking about it with the people that they're supposed to be talking about it with, but I don't know if it's possible by law, right? And so when we went to the hearing that day, I got it. When we went to the hearing that day, um, the judge we had to wait on a decision, right? Because the reality is New York does have that bail reform, which is a motherfucker if you have no criminal history, right? So I really thought that, oh, I got it. Oh, wow. It's crazy. Look at where they put it, y'all. I don't want to show you email. Let me try to. Right. It's like this article. Oh, I always get this backwards. Sorry. It's like mid page. I'm going to look into that in a little bit. Um, so right. And that's another thing too. Like, I know, maybe I'll just ask Mike myself, where are the videotapes? He's not going to admit it, right? Because in those videotapes, you're going to see what actually happened, right? You're going to see that students were attacked physically. So I don't think that they would keep that around. There was also, like, they would write progress notes in these black binders. I don't know where those are either. I do think that so that's what people seem to think is that a lot of the stuff is in the pond. I would wonder, this is what I wonder, for insurance purposes, right? Because you got to remember that they were billing insurance, right? So wouldn't they have to hold those for a certain amount of time? Who is trying to use the red barn for content? Oh, Carolyn. The barn was just a barn when I was there. They did open a school store, and we had like cheerleading practice in there, and I believe a laundry room got put. Right, somebody's got to have them, especially like, aren't there guidelines as far as like insurance purposes? Like, what are you absolutely speculating? But oh, you're good. Somebody misspelled it in an article, and I was just like, yeah, I is she talking about it recently? Right. That's what I'm talking about, Ivy. Wouldn't they have to hold them like, isn't that why we have places like Stone Mountain? Student records probably do differ, but what about medical? That's fine. Is that a recent video, that Red Barn? Is she talking about it now? Like, students don't want you to talk about it. I don't know how I can prove that to you. I read you one message. You need more? Like, they really don't, like, especially the things that they've heard her say. They don't want her to be dealing with it. Right. That's what I'm saying. I don't know, but maybe I should look into that, because that's the one thing that does bother me. But those tapes are proof of physical abuse. You know what I mean? I'm writing. I'm sorry. So, like, why would they hold on to the proof knowing that like the door's closing, right? Yeah. She has a picture of the bond. So the bond didn't always look the way it does now. Like, it used to be old when I was there. So it's different than like the school you see now, you know? It's not what it looked like when we were there. Right, but like, I would think that that would be against some type of law. And that's what always amazed me. that like they would film like what? That's true too, though. So we do have a bunch of we there's probably about 600 of us in like the main Facebook group. So we do have like a pretty good network. And I know like right now it just seems to be like a super emotional time for a lot of people. I think that it's been struggled more with this topic in the last 2 weeks than I have in the last 20 years. It has been an afterthought for the most part, right? Especially since doing like EMDR, it's not something that stayed on my mind um, a lot, right? But the last 2 weeks has certainly been like it's been the hardest regarding this situation. And that's another thing I'd like to know, Christina, because I can only it was Allenwood Academy after. So the Family School Truth campaign, right? Um so I got out in 97, right? I walked in 97. As I got out, like the more time that passed, internet was coming up, right? Google was coming up. So you could throw the name of the school in a Google search. And then, so what they did to combat that was they built a website called the Family School Truth Campaign. And on that page, it was student testimonials, right? Once that like with the way that search like Google works, like the what as it moved up in the search and the family school moved down, they couldn't combat that. They couldn't combat that's parents were doing their research, right? So they changed the name of the school to try to get away from that to Allenwood Academy. It was the family first, it was the family school, then it went to the family foundation school, and then it went to Allenwood Academy. Um, I don't know how we did 11 years ago in the group, and it's a population, right? So we used to have it was called a pop. We called it a pop, and it was the name of every student that was in the school and the date that they got in. I think that's it. But I was 84, right? But we what we know is that it later went up to 220, right? So I don't know. Maybe we'd be able to go through the yearbooks and cross reference them and see student leave, but not everybody. You got to remember that sometimes there was students there for 3 months. They came in and they left, right? So I don't know how we would be able to get that. I know that the group that like the main group that we have on Facebook has I'll tell you the exact number right now. 571 members, right? So I do think that they did believe that, right? I don't think that they bet on New York opening that statute of limitations, or the fact that so they did try, right? As the family school truth page, right, as that became a thing, they would say we were just disgruntled students and we didn't have a good experience and we were still mad about it, or like, oh, they're a drug addict and like degrade or shame us, and that wasn't the case. Like we were literally just telling our stories or the experience that we had with the school, but it was hurting their pockets, right? No. So you can't graduate unless you are both doing my case, for instance, right? I got there as a sophomore in June of 96. In October 97, when I left, I was a senior. I would have graduated, right? But I wasn't in a good place with the program, so I would have had to stay longer. And then if you stay longer, they like put you to work or something like that. Um, when I left, my mom owed them $300, so they refused to release my transcripts. So I wound up with a GED. So my mom spent over 100 grand for me to attend this school, and I wound up with a GED because of a dispute that my mom had with the bill, and they wouldn't give her my transcripts. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so that's another thing too, right? So students make up what's in a time consisted of. How did many students make up what's in a time consisted of? The statements are all the same. So, right, and that's the thing too, right? So there was a cook, but there were students in the kitchen cooking, right? Dish crew, wait staff, right? Like there was all um everything was essentially students doing the work, right? And then what did that do? That cut their costs, right? Because the students aren't getting paid. The money spent is wild. The money spent is wild. I know a student dropped a bill in the group the other day, and it was like 5,300. That's the whole. No, let me back up a second. Do I think that Tony and Betty started this with bad intentions to help teens that did not have or needed help? However, at some point, greed took over, right? And they just ran with it. That's the only thing that I could think. I can't say for sure whether Tony and Betty started with good intentions. I can, because I wasn't there, right? I can only say like what my experience is with when I was there, and what other students who came after me tell me what theirs was. So that's a thing too, right? Table topics. I never really liked to participate in table topics, like as an observer to give advice. I didn't like doing that. Um, but the staff, in my experience, right, the staff was much harder on whoever was the topic of the conversation than the students were. It is, and the irony of it all, table topics were at meals. Yeah, that was the um I know Daytop calls them haircuts. Synanon also has a word for them, and I forget what it is right now. But were um table topics was a very public and degrading humiliation. He had to have. Yeah, a meal and humiliation. Exactly. He had to have. All staff did. Where you going? Oh, work.
Work.
Yeah, duh.
Oh.
He had to have. That's literally, so the design of the school, right? He's a teacher, so he would have had normal hours, like school hours, right? Because that's what teachers did. Teachers sat with us. They could have brought their own meals, but they still sat at the table. You know what I'm saying? So there's no way. There's no way, right? And you also have to remember that even like, let's say you're a teacher, right? If a student's in the corner, they're not in class, right? So if you're in your class and you're teaching and that student is in the corner for a month and a half, right? There's no way. Like the abuse was so ingrained into every section of the school. There is no way he wouldn't have known. There is no way. Like, it's just not possible. Even if he was a good guy, right? Even if he was a good staff member, they still are very well aware of what's going on. Does that make sense? I don't know if thank you. Right. No, Ivy, it shouldn't be discussed in a room full of minors, right? Listen, if anything, this is the way I would see it. Like, let's just say a student had an issue in that department. That should absolutely be a private conversation. It should not be forced, right? Because we couldn't decline table topics, contrary to what Jan Turipko wants people to believe, right? We were not able to do that. So if the staff felt that a student had that much of an issue there, right? Then they would have that should have been a private conversation. It should have never been had in front of a group of their peers and humiliated over it anymore. No, I agree. I agree, my crazy life. So I have heard stories of staff that was there like one day and left. That during the weekends, um, Saturdays we did cleaning crews. Sundays we did have a little bit more open time, right? Um, but you'd still be at meals, right? You would still notice kids on sanctions, right? There is no denying it. Exactly. So the table topics are alone. Have a good day. Even if that is the only thing that you saw at any time that you were an employee at the school, that's abusive. You follow me? And that's what I say when I say like there's no way. There's just no way that you didn't know because absolutely what you should have done is made a call to DCF or something, right? That's what you should have done. I don't know. Sorry. That would have absolved me. You know what I'm saying? But I would have never gone back to work. Right. And like I do understand that it's a small town and there's limited, you know, opportunities, right? I get that. But shouldn't your values and your morals, I don't know, call me crazy, shouldn't that come first? I wouldn't, if I was getting paid for a job that was depleting my values, my morals, my entire belief system, it wouldn't be worth it to me. That's the crazy thing, right? Like you couldn't pay me a penny to work at that school. It just wouldn't happen. And the fact that now, right, that it's a very public situation, um, now you want to talk about it. You want to tell the truth about it. Let me rephrase that. Now you want to tell what you were involved and not involved in. But you've had 10 years to do that, right? That's what is infuriating to me. No, me neither. Me neither. And like I always wanted that, to be honest, right? Because as you grow up and you know, life happens, like it does come up, right? And there are things that you think about, right, on a regular basis. I wonder if staff does that. Like, clearly not, because he didn't remember the physical altercation where a kid spit in his face, right? Yeah, it's unfortunate. No. I'm not saying that there's an excuse. I'm just saying I could see that side of it, but you should have worked there for a day and reported it, right? And that's another thing to say that you were proud of the work you did there. I was kind of taken aback by that, to be honest. But I do know that most of the staff feels that way, right? Like the staff, what does the staff do? Do they give claim to the abuse? Because if they do that now, right, it all falls apart. Everything falls apart. If they acknowledge any wrongdoing, it all for the past 25 years, it all falls apart. So what can they do? I'm not saying what would I do. I'm saying what can they do, right? They have to keep up with this facade with disgruntled kids. But like think about it. Think about it. Number one, I would have hate Paul didn't even look up during the entire hearing. He did not face those students. Not one time. Kept his head down. No eye contact, right? Why? Right? And then so like what do? You have to keep up with that facade, right? They're angry, they didn't want to be there, they're pissed off, they're criminals, they're liars. Because then what happens, right? Now, don't get me wrong, there have been people, um, like somebody sent me a message on Reddit, and they're from Hancock, and they were like, we used to see runaways all the time. We always wondered what went on there. I'm so glad that place is closed. So there absolutely are people in Hancock that had that suspicions, right? But their suspicions were always pushed to the side because of this high ranking member in the community that is running that school, right? It's crazy. I wish that so now this is going to be interesting, right? This is going to be really interesting as far as staff's going to start saving their own ass, right? Staff's going to start saving their own ass, because I promise you, Paul Gear is not going to last in prison, right? And if you think about it, he's facing a lot of time, right? So what is he going to do? What is he going to do? What do you want to get ahead of that if you were on the other side of it? You know what I'm saying? So really it's only a matter of time. Who did? Oh, me too. I think that it's gonna happen, right? Now, I don't know that he'll admit to the sexual assaults, right? I have to read that later. I think they actually got his name wrong. I think he might be 57 age, sorry. Right. So did he really drive kids away? Right. So like somebody for 3-4 years, they weren't making any progress. They really would just send them on their way, right? Um, they did it with two students that I know of. One male, one female. They just kind of drove them to a bus station and they left. But I'm pretty sure that the one that drove the male was not Jimmy. It was somebody else. Right, exactly. But I don't know that he'll admit guilt, right? I don't think that he'll admit to doing that. I do think that he's pleading not guilty, but I know that the feds are they've been amazing. They have been amazing. They have been um super helpful, for a while, right? Because this has been coming to this point for years, right? um and I'm talking about like with the lawsuits and the articles and stuff like that. That has all been happening probably since like 2017. It has been like a buildup, right? And all these things going on behind the scenes. It's been, it's been in the works for a while. And Paul's own statements in those depositions, right? He corroborates the victim's stories, not realizing he's doing that. You know what I'm saying? So you figure at this point, I think there's 4 or 5. I'm not really sure. So I know it's multiple lawsuits that have been settled, right? So they have all these depositions that they can use as testimony to build, right? Yeah, well, I don't think he'll be in a low. So they are hiding him. We're not able to locate him. Paul's wife did work there as well. Um, I don't know. I know she wasn't at the hearing, but I don't know why she's not able to be charged. Probably because she's not the one that participated, but it should still be conspiracy, right? Married her, to be honest. And so I will say this: his wife was super quiet. Like she did work there, but she didn't really. I don't know. She wasn't really active, but she wasn't at the school. Yeah, excuse me, it is. I will tell. I know, right? It's so accurate. Because I emailed them recently. Hold on a second. I will pull it up. I'm looking for it in my email. Just bear with me. It is ffstips@fbi.gov. And there are, well, that's true too, right? Um, I really do feel like, hmm, I know there's more, right? And I know that it is, um it's unfortunate, right? Like it's just super unfortunate, and I'm glad that it's finally gotten to a point where we are being heard, right? Because, like, the Nicole just said, like, they really have the townspeople convinced, and they do all these acts of service work, and they own, like, the town, right? So that gets them viewed as like this person that could never participate in that, right? Church going on Sundays, super religious, like, that doesn't mean that they are not capable of what happens, right? Like, and we find out that, like, this black and white thinking is super detrimental to situations like this, right? Because, like, I understand that the subject matter in general is super hard for people to wrap their head around, right? And you have these pillars of the community that are being, not, I'm not going to say alleged because I know what you did, right? They're being accused of child abuse. So, like, normal people are not paying attention to that because they can't believe that something like this could happen. So the ponds was disgusting, y'all. Um, they did clean it up. I noticed in the pictures of, like, the new property, they did clean it up and, like, put a bridge there. It's super, but they used to force us to swim in it. It was gross. Um, but and that's the thing, right? That's the unresolved trauma is ultimately what becomes the issue, right? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and that was the biggest thing for me, right? Because, like, I'm from New York City, and even before I went to the family, like, I was not afraid to walk through Harlem, right? But that is just a different type of fear. And it's unfortunate, and maybe, I don't know, maybe, I know Liz Ionelli is, she planted a tree a couple of years back. It's called the Lost Souls tree, and it has rocked the it is so tiny, dude. Um, it was meant to bring a positive change to a place with so much negativity, right? And it's but, like, what could we do, right? Like, we can't do anything about the ones that have passed. The only thing that we could do is try to stop that number from growing. Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. Um, I should, 'cause I really, it really bothers me that they receive, like, government funding, and when I asked Mayor, like, "How do I get that to stop?" And he was like, "You're just not gonna." So the best way to go about it is go to the people that are supposed to be responsible for these places, right? Different states have different requirements, and ultimately, if you pull the license, they can't operate. But a lot of what these places do, right, is, let's say, "Hey, you, how are you?" A lot of what these places do is they can't combat the negative press. So what do? They shut down and rebuild from a different location with a different name, but it's still the same money, right? Still the same people. And that's another thing too, is that the staff members, a lot of times, not the family, right? But a lot of times these staff members are going from one place to the other, right? They'll go from one program and then quit this program, or be, terminated from this program, and then they go work at this program, right? So they kind of use the same staff that are all, like, they're aware of what's going on, right? And they know that they're not going to have any trouble with this staff member because they came from this place. You follow me? I get it. Listen, I get it. We were kind of forced into, like, we used to have adoration on Sunday nights for 2 hours and you just prayed for 2 hours. But I think that when you're in that type of situation, you're just so desperate for something, right? Even if it is, something that you really don't believe in, or that, like you just look for some type of outlet, right? It's just the way it is. That's what I'm saying. It's truly crazy that that it was able to go on for so long. And granted, like that, my program's closed. Like there are still, I think it's like statistically over 100,000 students that are shipped off to these places every year, and none of them should exist. I saw somebody dropped one in the group the other day about a cruise ship therapeutic program, which is super scary because the maritime laws ain't the laws on this soil, right? They're so unregulated, but that's a thing. That's scary. And like that's the thing with the people in Jamaica, right? Like and this was like a common threat, like at the family at least. Oh, we're gonna send you to Samoa. Oh, we'll send you to Jamaica, right? Like they used to threaten a lot with Samoa specifically. But in your mind, right? If they're trying to send you there from here, what goes on there, right? So you kind of like, at least you stick with the known and not take your chances with the unknown, because who the fuck knows what goes on there if you're literally being tortured at this place. You follow me? Yeah, I'm guilty. I did kind of force my kids to go to like CCD. I did. But actually wasn't me. It was more my ex-husband. It was like his mom was still alive and she was like a super religious Catholic, and like I told them go through confirmation and then you're done. You didn't have to do anything else. But that was like, you know, mm, that was another thing, people, right? Like I came from Eastridge and Eastridge was super culty, like, but they should have, right? And as far as I'm concerned, all of their policies and procedures absolutely should have been reviewed by a psychiatrist so that they could tell them if that would have any type of ramifications, right? But none of that was done. They just adopted certain aspects of a culty program to their own, you know? I wonder what happened to the priest, right? Because I do know that the priest was also named in a lawsuit. Right. Listen, same. While I was there, I was more religious there than I was like ever. I didn't get married in a Catholic church. I got married in St. Lucia, you know? Right. But I did go to CCD. It's just crazy. Um, Hi. And but like so daycare is actually the example that Maya gave me, right? Because it's kind of a similar situation. So the problem that we have is that like these private boarding schools, they don't really have an oversight committee or have to deal with regulations, right? That's why they're private, right? Like, so he said daycare, like he used it as like a comparison. Like, think about a daycare. A daycare can operate, but they have to be licensed by this department, right? So that department is who you should go to. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I know. So it was gorgeous. The marriage, not so much, right? Because that's how it goes. It's just how it goes. Um, it becomes, and I will say that. So like there are staff, right? Well, use staff time, right? Yes, thank you. I'm gonna end because my little sister's about to come home from work. So if anybody has any questions, drop them in the chat now. I know that there's some, like, because I was getting a lot of messages, and it was just like super overwhelming. So I figured that this would be easier. That way I could just get it out and keep it moving. Um, I'm going on a vacation very soon. But yes, I appreciate it. And I know that the students are they're seeing the comments, right? And I've been getting messages like, thank you and such, and they're really they're really grateful, because that's the problem, right? They discredit, most of the staff discredit, and they have to make us look like crazy liars, but that is not the case. And I'm hoping that you'll see there are students in the comment sections, and if you read the comments, you'll catch which ones they are. But most of them, um, they're not public like I am, right? Like I was public before this, so this wasn't necessarily a tough transition for me. But others, it's not something that they're into, right? Most of the time, I do. Most of my lives are on TikTok because I have to do it to satisfy my agency requirements. YouTube, I used to do lives on YouTube because I would get banned on TikTok so much. Like the second I opened my mouth, I was banned. But now that I have an agency, that's not really a problem. So my life schedule has changed a lot in the last year. So I don't necessarily have 30 hours a month to do lives. So I'm normally over there, but this subject matter probably would have gotten me banned. So it was easier for me to be over here and just get it done. I will try. I know that there's subscriptions now, so I will try. I do have to find a day and like a specific time. But so I'll have to do those, right? Because I have to meet the requirements. But I do appreciate it. And I'll do it again soon. If you do have questions, my email is in my About Me section. I am always pretty open. I do have an interview with a news reporter next week, but outside of that, I'm pretty open. Not really. I'm really the only one from my program that has the platform um, to do it. TikTok name is Shaolin's __ finest. Think about Wu-Tang, because that's where I'm from. Nicole, thank you. I know it's been, I can't imagine it's a lot for people like you that knew him. And I'm hoping that I will be, let me find the way to put it, because I don't want to get myself in trouble. I'm hoping to be able to share things from the courts soon. You know what I'm saying? When and if I am able to, I will. That's the best way that I could do it. And I'm going to, yeah, absolutely. I don't care about any of that. And I know I did say there are a couple of conversations that I've had with people privately, but anything that is public is for public consumption. I'm not going to falsely copyright strike you for reposting or using my content, whether it's used with fair use or not. That's not how I move. It's unfortunate, but if some people have had private conversations with me, and if there is something that absolutely cannot be shared, I will absolutely say that, right? So I don't worry about any of that. Everything is good. If you have any questions, my email is in my About Me section. I will get to it, I promise. But I hope everybody has a good day, and we'll do this again soon. Remember that, thanks, Down to Deb. Remember that Kendall has the TikTok with the Wilderness Program Girl. I'm sorry. She's doing a TikTok live with the Wilderness Program Girl. Also, Brandy is starting a series on this whole industry. We are also working with other things going on, because Brandy does have a network. So we're trying to move from, one section to another. But everybody have a good day. I will talk to y'all soon, and I hope that stay sane, right? Because these YouTube streets, they ain't fucking around. It's crazy out there.